We're back with Beyond the Sequence, but today we're actually going outside of the sequence. We're doing something that was unplanned while we're still talking about sequences. So, where we're headed with this, Sarah, is as always, we're back channeling. Did you see this? Have you seen that? And Sarah sent something to me a few days ago. I said, listen in at this point in this clip, something you were listening to. And I said, what is it about, Sarah? She said, it's about APOE. And I listened in and I said, I really think we should talk about this. Or do you want to talk about this, Sarah? Because outside of MTHFR and CO-methyltransferase, I would say the next area that gets a lot of, I don't want to say hysteria is not fun, not a nice thing to say, but it gets a lot of attention. A lot of things get blown out of, what's the word? Blown out of what? Context.
Proportion.
Yeah, proportion, context
Yeah.
is APOE. And so we were supposed to be continuing along our series, but we decided we're just going to put a hard pin in a stop in that series and say, let's just talk about APOE, and then we'll come back and resume programming on the schedule we had. So Sarah, that's where we're going. You want to add some context more to how I introduce this, like what we're going to talk about, and then we are freewheeling today.
Yep. No real structure tying us down today, but I feel like Amanda and I have these conversations all the time where, there's just a natural flow and we want our podcast to be conversational and not so structured and stringent, especially when you're talking about science. It can be a little like, whoa, intense. But I listened to a podcast. There's about 10 minutes of a podcast I listened to called the Holderness Family. And they put some things on Reels and on social media. They're wonderful content creators. They won the Amazing Race a few years ago. So they're just like a sweet family.
They are.
Wholesome to follow. So it's very enjoyable to follow their content. But Penn Holderness had shared that he had been tested for APOE4 because I guess both of his parents had Alzheimer's. His dad has since passed and his mom, is declining, unfortunately. And so he actually has an APOE4E4 genotype, which is pretty rare. So the presentations that I give, I'm often with audiences that don't know much about nutrigenomics. And so I like to define terms and kind of set the stage. And so I was presenting last week at our Indiana Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and doing my presentation called The Compliance Conundrum. So leveraging DNA insights to improve client change, lasting change, and increase compliance for our patients and clients. And so in kind of helping define the terms, I give this example of this article that was in Reuters in 2023, where it was talking about this problem with one trained genetic counselor per 82,000 Americans. And so if we're just outright testing for APOE4, what do you do with that information? And coming into my own story and how I even pursued nutritional genomics, I was like, who is most equipped to practice this? And at first it was a genetic counselor, and we have wonderful genetic counselor colleagues that we co-edited the Krauss Dietetics textbook chapter on nutritional genomics with Natalie and Denise.
That's right.
Yeah. And so it's so cool to see genetic counselors get trained in nutritional genomics, because I went to the IU school for the graduate program on genetic counseling when I initially was pursuing this as a career. And the director was like, I'm not sure this is the right path for you. What you're talking about sounds awesome, but I don't know that you're going to be really happy. And there are 3 things that she said they mostly did in genetic counseling. And that was prenatal. So you're looking at chromosomal additions and deletions and miscarriage and frequent losses, things like that. There's also oncology. So you're looking at types of cancer, how best to treat it. And then you have inborn errors of metabolism, which for dietitians is a lot of the work that we might do in the specialized metabolic spaces. So those were the 3 things. Notice, memory and cognition was not necessarily one of them. And there may be genetic counselors out there who know what to do with this information. But I feel like by and large, they don't necessarily have the nutritional biochemistry background to take something that is genetic predisposition and try to reduce the risk for that. So the couple of statistics I do talk about are the NIH estimates that up to 25% of Americans have one APOE4 allele and up to 5% have two copies. Now, APOE4E4 genotypes are said to have a 60% chance of developing Alzheimer's disease, but only make up 15% of cases.
Say that again, Sarah. Hello, say that again.
Yeah, so the APOE4E4 patients are said to have a 60% chance of developing Alzheimer's disease, but only make up 15% of the cases. Why is that, Amanda? What do you think?
Oh, I think it's
I know what I want to say.
Because your genes are bathed in the environment that you put them in, and they will react to the environment that you put them in. And so, as we always say, just because your gene looks a certain way doesn't mean to say it's so. Genes do not predict or diagnose, at least the testing we're looking at, which would include APOE4. So we probably want to talk about, what does the 4 mean? What is this gene? So talk about how we're reading it, like what 2, 3, and 4, Sarah. And then I'll talk, because I did a little bit of work. I'm like, let me do a little work to explain.
You cheater.
How I did a little bit of work, because I'm like, how can we explain in a way that's understandable what this gene does, so we've got that straight, from the beginning. So let's talk about, we're just throwing out this nomenclature, 2, 3, 4. What is it? What does it mean?
Yeah, the APOE3 is what we call the wild type or normal. E2 is protective or beneficial, and then E4 is a risk factor. And so much like, BRCA for breast cancer, APOE4 are risk factors, but notice that's not a diagnosis. And people do come to us and they go, I was diagnosed with MTHFR. It's not a diagnosis, but it's a clue. That's a clue into how our health can manifest positively or negatively if we're moving towards health or away from health. And one personal example is actually my grandmother had passed away from Alzheimer's at about 70 years old. But I was about 24 years old when that happened, when she passed. But my whole recollection of her was very much struggling with memory. But to my knowledge, looking at some of our family genetics, I have yet to see an APOE4 allele. But in Northwest Indiana, we have so much industry. We're known to have lead in our, water and lead in our soil, as well as a number of heavy metals, because it's a big steel industry area. And so just paying attention to what are the environmental exposures that we're having that help define why that statistic is as low as it is with an APOE4 allele. So
but you're also a big agriculture state too, right?
Yeah,
like
very
the
much
southern
so.
part, or the northwestern. I can't remember which part. So I know I've driven through parts. Like, it's hugely agricultural.
Yeah, tons of corn and soybeans on the rotation. We do have, cows and pigs, and we're the biggest producers of popcorn in the country as well. So,
woohoo! I did not know that.
I love popcorn, so no complaints here.
Awesome. That's awesome. You do know, because I was jump in. So I grew up in the United Kingdom, and our popcorn always had caramel on it. So when I came to the United States, I'm like, where is the sweet stuff? So we never ate popcorn with salt or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm like, and it was in so few places you buy it. Maybe at the fair, you would see that along with candy floss. But so it's kind of neat for me to see this was a regular snack in the United States.
Yes. And Chicago is well known to have our own blend, which is cheese popcorn and then caramel corn mixed together.
Oh.
I personally find that a little intense, but there are people who love it. I'm just a straight, we use coconut oil just because I like the flavor, and a whirly pop kind of thing on the stove with just regular salt, and it's so good.
Paul will put truffle oil on ours and thyme.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. He just has, the French cook. I'm like, well, okay, I like that too. So anyway, so you're the biggest popcorn producers. But yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's go back to the environment. So.
Yeah, back to the environment. So when I'm giving presentations, to kind of wrap up that conversation, I like to give examples of things that I do look for when I see an APOE4 allele, because I don't want people to freak out. I'm not freaking out. I'm looking at cholesterol, which, maybe you can speak a little more to that, but I'm looking at cholesterol. What are B12 levels? What is your thyroid hormone doing? Because it controls so many metabolic switches. As well as like how's your digestion and sleep. And our next episode that we were going to do today, next time we're going to dig more deeply into sleep. But there's so many other metabolic factors that we need to look at, including glucose and insulin that go with APOE4. It's not just about if you are having cognitive decline or not. The clues that we talk about so often in all of our episodes, we've got the check engine light on and we need to address it. And that's why it's so helpful to see our genetic, predispositions sooner rather than later, so that we're not trying to play catch up metabolically.
Yeah, and I had a thought, and I mentioned it to you, like when we were chit-chatting about jumping ahead and doing this last week. When I was thinking about your grandma, passing away, and at least in the DNA that you can look at, there will be no suggestion there's a 4 allele in the history. We don't know, right? But it just depends how that will show up. But when I have looked at cases where people are really concerned about dementia, it, quote, runs in the family, and we don't know the DNA history. What I find interesting is when I run epigenetics, like from True Diagnostics, I can actually see the wear and tear in the systems that's ahead of the time, right? This is like looking at something we're not going to pick up in the DNA, because we're using methyl markers to look at where the genes are taking the hit, and then we're able to roll those into systems like immune or neurological or whatever. That is amazing. Then when I then compare that with labs like, elevated blood sugar or elevated LDL, I'm like, we now have a real good lens. Even if we don't know the DNA of the family, at least from your perspective, even though you don't have an APOE4 allele, the wear on your system we can now see. That is amazing. It's not like it's predictive. It's like putting all these pieces together. And like we said, epigenetics is the environment that surrounds our genes. They're going to respond whether you have a 4, a 2, a 3, it doesn't matter. They're going to take the wear and tear.
Exactly.
Amazing to see that.
Yeah, and the environmental exposures, I think, are the concerning part, because while E2 is beneficial and protective, if you have enough, mold or heavy metals, or your detoxification systems are really gummed up, there's not as much that is going to protect you as you think it might, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that 2 allele, and I just want to go back and just explain a little bit about 2, 3, 4. What are they talking about? I don't have that on my test, but the 2 form, so I am a 2, 3. It's like, oh my gosh, it's protective. And yet when you dig underneath the hood, sometimes, but I don't see it very much, the 2 allele, you may have higher triglyceride values, but I've never seen that by itself. I've never seen, you're a 2, 4 or a 2, 3. You won't be a 2, 2. That's a rare, super rare. But often, like if you have the 2 allele, and we're looking at other genes like APOC3 or A5 that can impact the lipoprotein and how it's unpacked or metabolized, then that too can really accentuate what you may see in the lab. So again, a perfect example, it's usually not like one aspect of the gene by itself. It's the environment that you put it in, but it's also how it's playing with its siblings in the similar pathways, right? So, but I've also said, and you've seen me talk about this in one of our more clinical groups, that I often see people with the 2 form with immune associated issues. Commonly, psoriasis is one that comes up. Again, it's not predictive. The APOE gene can be a disruptor to immune modulation. We won't get into that, but I think that's one of the ways it shows up. And sure enough, when I ask clinicians, those who had the 2 allele were far more likely to say, yes, I have psoriasis and I have that too. They could be 2, 3 like me. So I do not have psoriasis. My brother does. So it's interesting just to see the patterns and say, the gene's getting in there under the hood. So
I so rarely see the E2 at all.
Oh,
Like
really? Yeah.
in the couple hundred that I've read, I've seen it maybe 2 or 3 times, like not at all. I see mostly E3, E3, the occasional, I mean, maybe 10 or 15. I've seen E4, just one. I don't know that I've seen a E4, E4, maybe once.
Yeah, I've seen it maybe 3 times. The 3-4 is relatively frequent, but it also could be that the individuals coming to see us, they haven't been able to figure out these sort of aberrant, these weird things that are going on with them. And that's usually, it's 3-4 is in there under the, the 4 allele is on there under the hood. So let's define what we're talking about with these. Why these numbers? Because mostly when you look at genes, they'll have letters, right? So MTHFR will be, could be the 677 form. You're going to see a C or a T or a CC or a TT. And the APOE nomenclature is numeric. I think it's the only one we see commonly, right, that has a number. So that's what we're talking about. Obviously there's stuff in the literature and we're working with in research, but when we're talking about 2, 3s, and 4s, it's just the nature of, at least scientifically, how we're referencing that gene. This would be a much better explanation than that, but it's not that, we're suddenly throwing numbers at genes that have letters. So, yeah. So should we talk about what this gene does? And then this is why I cheated. So let me find this fun way. And I have to read it, Sarah, because I'm not going to memorize it. So, and if you're listening, you don't know I'm reading something. But you'll have fun. So let's talk about describing what this gene does and where the aberrations can come in and where does this dementia piece come in potentially. And then we'll talk about, like you said, when it gives us a check engine light, what engines we're checking. I mean, you and I we have overlap and we may look at different things, but in our brains immediately we run through a list of things we're going to look at. So I love this, and I remember Nikki at 3x4 talking like many years ago, talking about you want to think about APOE as being a bus, and there was buses and bus stops and bus conductors. I'm like, what are you talking about? So when I drilled in to try and understand APOE, here comes the bus. So and it's brilliant. So. And this is Nikki's word. This is me like going back in and saying, sure enough, there's a bus. So the brain, APOE, and the story is called the brain's cholesterol bus system, which is amusing to me because I took a bus to school. You did too, right? We get on school buses here in the U.S.
A little bit. I mostly walked to school in elementary, but a bus in high school.
Yeah, it's same here. So this is it. And think of your brain as a busy city where cholesterol is the essential building material needing to keep the power lines running, and just the infrastructure. So the drivers of the bus are your brain cells, the astrocytes. And so these cells are your factory. They build the cholesterol, but they can't just throw it out the window, right? What we make cholesterol, we need a delivery system. So the delivery system is APOE. So we got a city, we've got cells in the brain that need to manufacture a cholesterol, what the astrocytes do. That's a collective name for brain cells. There's some siblings in there. So it produces cholesterol, it needs a delivery system, and the system is APOE, it's your delivery system. So you think of APOE as a delivery system. In my little notes here, it's a shuttle bus. So the shuttle acts like a bus. It loads up the cholesterol from the brain cells, and it drives it through the brain fluid to all the neighborhoods that need it the most. That makes sense, right? So produce cholesterol, and APOE is the bus. You got to deliver the cholesterol where the brain needs it. And the consumers can be other brain cells, but mostly they're going to be neurons. So your communication cells. So your neurons need cholesterol to build the connections and maintain themselves. And the way we learn this in school, this outer sheath, the protective layer of your neurons is going to be called the myelin sheath. So cholesterol is really integral. So is ApoE. So is choline, right, to protecting and sending communication, informational signals in the brain. So the neurons they can make cholesterol, but they don't make very much of it. So they're basically standing around waiting for the delivery truck to show up, which is ApoE. So you think of ApoE, and it's amazing to look at models as in the brain. It's delivering cholesterol. So The brain makes its own cholesterol, people. It's its own starship or interplanetary system. So it makes its own cholesterol. And APOE takes it to where that cholesterol is needed in the brain. And when you look at cells in the brain where APOE may be disruptive, you actually see kind of the cells, think of the cells of having these branches I think of it like a tree in winter, you can see all the branches, right? But a tree in spring, you can see all the leaves on it, right? So it fills out and it's really bushy. So think of the brain in some ways when APOE is being disruptive, you're kind of looking at a winter tree year round versus, the brain doesn't go through seasons, but it wants to have its clothes on, right? And APOE is preventing the clothes from going on the trees, the leaves on the branches is a way to think about it. So I think that's kind of a nice way to understand it, right? That if APOE doesn't show, it was Nikki, if APOE doesn't show up, and she had something, this is like 5 years ago, and if you have a drunk bus driver, the bus driver doesn't show up to the bus stop, I'm like, wait, what's that got to do with APOE, whether the driver comes or not? But anyway, you can imagine, if there's disruption and maybe the bus doesn't come that day, but so it impacts the delivery system. Some days it comes, some days it doesn't, some days it's late, but in the end, the system wears out. So think of the tree with branches, with leaves, and maybe some of those trees are getting, the branches are getting exfoliated. That's a way to think about APOE.
So if you had clients who had both an APOE4 as well as genes implicated in cholesterol metabolism challenges, would that increase the risk further in your mind as something that needs to be?
It's an interesting question because you've got you have to cross the blood-brain barrier to get into the brain, so it's its own system. But I think what we're thinking about with cholesterol, and this is just me thinking at the top of my head because I don't necessarily put the two together. It's because what's happening when we're looking at genes that are impacting cholesterol metabolism, we never just look at those by themselves. But disruption in cholesterol metabolism, transportation can disrupt the vasculature. And that's more like what we're looking at versus what's actually going on inside the brain. But we want to look at other things that may transport into the brain that impact nutrition or nourishment into the brain, such as glucose or the transportation of DHA across the blood-brain barrier is actually essential too. So how do you look at that, Sarah? The same way, we're looking at sort of two different systems, both of which can affect transportation and the, vascular integrity, I guess.
Yeah. If I see some of those risk factors, we want to keep an eye on cholesterol really, really well, but more importantly, we want to protect it from oxidizing at, a fast rate. And that's where I think the choline comes into play. And we see choline used for, for cognition and cholesterol and bile and, everything that runs through there. And so that's where digestion has to come first before the brain. And I think so often we look at cholesterol or we look at cognition and we're thinking brain, but really we got to go back a couple of steps. And what is digestion doing? Because if we're either not eating enough, not having, a variety of foods, maybe we don't even tolerate eggs, and choline rich foods. And therefore we're setting ourselves up for down the line, having the risk for cognition really be challenged. But we need enough of those methyl donors and supporting methylation. And so we know we can use things like creatine to help, as you say so well, ease the pull on our methyl donors to reallocate those to other processes. And so we're using creatine for cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's type patients because it's working so well. And it's, one of the safest, most studied supplements out there. We think of it for muscle and sports performance, and that is true. But we also can use it for brain neuroprotection for concussions as well as for neurodegenerative disorders for, all the reasons that I just stated that you taught me years ago. If we use 70% of all of our carbon and 3 hydrogens, methyl donating molecules to make creatine, then you can utilize creatine. And so that to me seems like a safer, better option than freaking out about what our cholesterol levels are doing and recommending a statin as an automatic treatment.
Yeah. It's true, because what you're talking about is vascular integrity. And part of that, like, yes, oxidized LDL, anything that's going to be injurious to the endothelium, but elevated homocysteine, this is where the methylation piece comes in, is by itself probably one of the most inflammatory molecules in the body, because elevated levels will impact it's the ADMA receptor, right, which prevents nitric oxide production. So then we have stricture in the arteries. Name a vessel. It can be in the brain, it can be anywhere, it can be in the kidney, it can be in the heart. Any vessel is subject to the same injury regardless of where it is. And so that's why the methylation piece and what you're talking about with creatine is so important, because, and especially if you have someone, we think about it, Sarah, somebody who may be, maybe we're starting to notice a little bit of memory slip, so just some tiny tinge or something. They also can be somebody who could be at fall risk or imbalance or anything like that. Then we have, I think about this all the time, then we have a traumatic injury or like a brain injury, like you said, which can come from sport. And then the body is so busy taking all those molecules to repair, to rebuild muscle synthesis, to repair, right? Whatever that tissue is, wherever that muscle is, it's then being taken away from where it's needed to, support neurotransmitters or reduce homocysteine, because that's also like through the roof because of the pull on the system. So it's interesting how our brains work. We like immediately fire through about 20 cycles. So you have no idea what we just said. There's a course and there's this podcast. But the bottom line is what we're looking at is when you're looking at APOE, 4 allele, whether it's 2, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4, there's a number of things that go through our minds. Number one, nutrient sufficiency, back to the digestion, right? Usually compromised, and even the healthy of us have something going on. So we need to optimize nutrient availability so that the nutrients that we're targeting can actually cross the blood-brain barrier or not do injury because they're not available for the methylation cycle or something like that. Or transsulfuration pathway. We can talk about that. Okay. So, all right. You know what I do want to talk about, though, that's missed? Because we went to cholesterol, right? And I'm going to go back and say, okay, when you see ApoE4, what's 5 things you look at? We'll go through yours and we'll go through mine. But one of the things that I think is really interesting to the point about nutrient sufficiency is what we know with people who have a 4 allele, and I think it's Rhonda Patrick and some of the individuals that she's worked with that brought us to our attention. The people with the 4 allele, the receptor that imports or transports EPA and DHA, particularly DHA, into the brain, may be faulty. In other words, it may be one day it's on, one day it's off, it's inefficient, or the DHA molecule does not bind effectively to it. And so you could potentially have lower DHA levels in the brain. Potentially, we don't know, right? So if you're not eating foods that our ancestors did that is naturally rich in EPA and DHA, which is the form that the body recognizes without any problem, then oftentimes you may be taking a supplement, or you've been told to take a supplement, and we don't even know what your ApoE4 allele or your ApoE alleles are doing. So it turns out that sometimes those supplements are actually useless to you because the form of DHA is not in a form that can actually work around that receptor and diffuse into the brain. So in other words, the body's brilliant. It's like, yeah, I got a faulty receptor here, but if you eat food that come from nature, no problem. But if you don't eat foods rich in omega-3s, like naturally rich in the form that nature provides us, which is why nature is brilliant, then you need to take a supplement in specific form where the form of DHA can basically cross the blood-brain barrier without the support of that receptor. It can diffuse. And that is some of the work that Rhonda Patrick talks about. And she wrote I think her PhD or dissertational thesis on this. And I forget who her advisor was, like super well known. Anyway, forgive us, Rhonda. We can't remember, but look that up because she herself has the APOE 3/4, I think, allele. So it talks a lot about this. Yeah.
So the answer isn't just reducing cholesterol levels.
No.
Because that is, I think, the conventional approach is, well, APOE4 cholesterol in the brain is the problem, therefore we should suppress cholesterol. What's the downstream of that,
Right.
with reducing cholesterol levels?
What's the downstream of it? Well, we are nothing without cholesterol, right? We change membrane fluidity in our cells, in our tissues. It's like the first thing I look at. We reduce hormone production. We don't need any help reducing hormone production as we get older. We actually need the help from cholesterol to produce hormones. That's like one of the areas I see it the most. And we need cholesterol to produce bile, so we don't have digestive issues throughout our lives. So the idea of suppressing cholesterol, I think it has its place as long as we're playing with a full hand and we have the full deck, right? But that said, you and I know that when we see a 3/4, we are going to look at cholesterol metabolism, but we're going to drill into a much more advanced test. If the physician isn't going to order it, we will see if we can find out why and still push them to order something like a Boston heart or Cleveland heart. Or a vibrant cardiac profile. I think they may have changed that. I can't remember what that's called now. But in other words, it gives us the full deck. It doesn't just look at LDL, HDL. It looks like inflammatory markers like LP, little a, MPO, and it's just an amazing, and homocysteine tests, and also fractionates LDL, and in some cases HDL. So now you can see exactly how the body may be handling lipids, or if someone is a hyperabsorber or hyperproducer. There's things we can now get in with biochemistry and kind of try and manipulate the pathways to optimize cholesterol so it doesn't become oxidized, why we prevent that, to prevent injury to the vasculature. Right, which creates oxidative stress, which drives inflammation, which the entire body is going to experience, including the brain. So the cholesterol story is a little bit different how we're looking at it, because we're looking at the applications of dysregulation to the entire body and not whether you need a statin or not. What do you think, Sarah? Do you look at it differently, or?
No, I agree with all of that. I think those who are also increased risk for cognitive decline in Alzheimer's are not just APOE4, but those who blaze through their dopamine really quickly. So assessing, their neurotransmitters and their dopamine into the nervous system and neurodegenerative disorders, I think, is also a really helpful part of a good assessment. Because those same people who have ADHD, like the original poster for which that this podcast episode came up was, well, they put me on a statin first, and he already has, an ADHD diagnosis, and then started with a GLP-1 too, which is not something I necessarily feel super comfortable speaking to. The GLP-1, but just, when he described that he's having more burping issues, I was like, I was like, already I've got 5 questions for him with how digestion is going, because if we're slowing down digestion and having maybe reflux. It sounds like now we've got a low stomach acid issue, and that's just not the
Off you
route I would have
go.
gone.
Yeah, it's like downhill all the way to all these weird other symptoms. Oh, it must be my brain, right? Which it could roll up like that, right? Oh, this must be disease setting in my brain. No, it's a B12 deficiency, or it's a a stomach acid sufficiency issue potentially.
Yeah, and I did get to look through my grandmother's labs after she'd passed away and before I ever got into genomics. And it's just like, wow, I could have helped her years ago because she had low tanked B12 and her
No.
TSH was a 6. And so I'm assuming they've never tested her for Hashimoto's, which I have. And so having thyroid issues is going to impact so many metabolic things. I know someone commented on my comment for the reel that was talking about pen holderness and his APOE 4E4 is like, how does the thyroid have anything to do with cognitive decline? And I was like, oh man, we could write a book on how the thyroid is rolled into so many other metabolic, mechanisms, but it's ad nauseum. If the thyroid, it's such a controlling hormone that touches just about everything. And if that's off, a lot of things are off.
Yeah, yeah, that's like a whole show just on that. Because it's so interesting where we work at the intersection of science. Because I immediately think, the immune system, hormones, like bone structural. It's so interesting. Yeah, where all those things fit. So was he having thyroid issues too? You were looking at your grandma, but we don't
Yes,
know.
my grandmother had thyroid issues and low B12 and she had low appetite for a really long time and probably wasn't sleeping well, but caregivers, we're going to talk about sleep next episode, but those who are caregivers, both for young children and you're not sleeping well as caring for an aging parent or spouse and you are up at all hours, you need to find some respite care. That is not negotiable because you yourself, if let's say you're caring for a parent or a spouse with cognitive decline and you are not taking breaks yourself and getting good night's sleep somewhere in there, you yourself will have cognitive decline. I'm just going to say it. Sleep, we're taking out the metabolic garbage when we're sleeping. And if we're not sleeping, we're not taking out the metabolic garbage. It's a really hard thing to watch. And it happens again and again because it's a high stress, thing to be a caretaker. On so many levels, you're worried about what's going to happen or what you're going to do when they're gone. And it's just...
And what happens if they fall or if I'm out of the room and
Yeah.
they need to go to the bathroom? Yeah, it's like stress upon top of stress. Yeah. And depending on the gene palette you've been given, those signals in the neurotransmitter pathways can be at a kind of emergency level. I can imagine, Sarah, especially in the dopamine pathway. It's what I'm seeing more and more is beyond this podcast, but like the impact of genes that we weren't really looking at, like ANC3, AKT1, CCNA1C, how they really accentuate or suppress signals so that people just feel like they're on a roller coaster. Then you have no sleep. Then your body's in stress mode anyway, so the signals are even louder or more abrupt. It is like you must feel like you're in a boxing match, or your body does from a signaling perspective. So anyway,
Yeah.
so with our ApoE4, you look at digestion. Yeah, you're looking at cholesterol, but more through the lens of optimization, right, to prevent oxidation, which creates oxidative stress, immune dysregulation, right? So it's that cycle. What else?
Yeah, I think cholesterol is not something I'm freaking out about under most levels. It's just mostly like, okay, that's good to assess. We'll keep that in mind as the marker we watch change while
Exactly.
we're addressing all of the
The other things.
inflammation and everything else. It's like that, we're going to see that go down. That is something I'm not actively treating cholesterol, but we're coming at it, from the side where we've got, omega-3s and polyphenol rich foods and cruciferous, vegetables and enough fiber in general that will help,
Bring down,
keep
yeah.
that, yeah, bring it down. Like fiber is huge for both detoxification of toxic compounds as well as lowering cholesterol. And we know that because it's on the labels for your oats and, part of a heart healthy diet, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
And
you
Americans
can
are,
get fiber in vegetables, people. It's okay. They count. They do triple duty.
they do.
Polyphenols, vitamins, minerals,
They,
fiber.
yes. Fiber comes in a variety of packages, including ones that come right out of the ground. So that's the good news.
They do.
But yeah, like it's not something I treat directly. It will be treated indirectly with everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, there's ways to steer and manipulate cholesterol. And yeah, I mean, we have to be careful of our scope of practice too. There are definitely cases, genetic cases, are way outside of our practice. But we can still steer the intelligence of the body and the biochemical systems, even if these genes are being disruptive. But I rarely see those cases. Yeah, I see disruption to cholesterol metabolism often as part of midlife, as hormones are changing, as receptors become desensitized, and there's ways around that. So, yeah, we need cholesterol, people. We need it. What else? So cholesterol, digestion. Great reminder on digestion.
Digestion, omega-3s, you've already mentioned, B12, thyroid. Those are probably my heavy hitters with cognition. And it just really depends what else is going on in the genes, because oftentimes we can hit the choline piece and supporting methylation, and the omega piece and some neuromag or magnesium 3 and 8 can support crossing the blood-brain barrier. But really, I think we want to protect the integrity of the blood-brain barrier by whatever our environmental exposures are. And so,
True.
unfortunately, we see a plethora of neurodegenerative disorders in our farmers
Wow, hugely in the Midwest.
hugely. Yeah, it's very negative. And I think Iowa has the highest instance of cancers, and Indiana is not far behind, but all across the Midwest with all of our agriculture. We have to find some kind of middle ground between sustainable food and protecting, the blood-brain barrier from all of these diseases, from cancer to neurodegenerative, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we need to do a better job. I mean, we were in Belize and I saw an advertisement, one of those big road signs for glyphosate, in a foreign country. And I was like,
Oh,
wow.
man. Wow. Well, don't worry, they're blockaded right now, so you got your chance to grow organic food because but it's going to be interesting. Like, yeah, it's as much as that's sort of flippant thing to say, but it really will impact what we know, our food supply, the growing season, etc. So, but yeah, I remember one of my friends from Oregon. Her husband his whole family were dairy farmers in Wisconsin. She said, yeah, you could kind of go back and pick off literally on one road, the roads in the Midwest. I mean, they're like, you got F road, F and a half, F and 3/4, right? Well, maybe that's Wisconsin, right? But at each mile mark or each change in the road would be another farm and another death. And it was just like astounding when they're able to look back. He left the Midwest to work. Her husband left the Midwest as a dairy farmer to work, do something completely different. But when he would go home, he's gone. Down the farm lane, it's wow. So your point about the blood-brain barrier, which requires fluidity in the membrane, right? Cholesterol,
Choline,
choline, yes,
the vagus nerve.
okay. So, yeah, and you can't get those unless your digestive system works. So it does go all the way back to the gut. So, what about blood sugars? What about that? You're
Yeah.
monitoring those.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we're already kind of calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. So there is a factor there. I wouldn't say that that happens as often in my clientele with APOE4, but
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
one of those markers. It's just like everything else. We got to assess, the whole gamut of things that we think of. I would say that's been lower on my radar as far as things that I've noticed, but it's definitely a factor for those who have insulin resistance and blood sugar management issues, which a plug to Karen Kennedy. She just published her book called Hack Your Blood Sugar Using a CGM. So just a shout out to her. She just released her book. So
Yeah,
super
that's
excited for
cool.
her. She does amazing work using continuous glucose monitors to check the data to help understand that it's not always about the food. It's about the stress, or you're living off cortisol, and we're seeing spikes in
100%.
blood sugar in the fasted state. So I guess the thing that I want people to take away from us talking about blood glucose is that it's not necessarily that you're eating the wrong things. You just might not be eating consistent meals in general, which can happen with farmers. Like you're out on the field and maybe you're not eating full meals or snacks, or you're living off of stress where you're like, oh, I'm hitting my stride. I'm just going to work through lunch and I'll eat
Exactly.
later, which I'm definitely guilty of doing
And we
that.
all are, this feels
We
good.
all
We're on a
are.
roll.
Yeah, you get on a roll, but I like to say this, like, love yourself enough to eat lunch. Love yourself enough to nourish your body, and you don't have to earn it. Just love yourself in that way to go, you know what? That's right. Sarah told me I should, eat consistent meals, like, reminding my parents, like, hey, did you guys eat breakfast today, or did you just get right to work on
Yeah.
the to-do list today? I'm like, it's okay to be intentional about certain types of intermittent fasting, but if it's just easier not to eat because you'd rather get something else done, then you're going to have potentially blood sugar management issues or living off cortisol, which then you're going to see, numbers spike.
And weight gain, weight loss resistance, and autoimmune issues that you have no idea where they came from. It's just, yeah, when you work in genetics, the pathways are imprinted in our brains, how this works. And cortisol is not a friend to mood balance or sleep. It's a good friend for your immune system, people. It loves to stoke the fire. And so that's why I think you and I talk about it, and our colleagues, unless you get your foot off the gas pedal, there is no supplement that you can take. And I'm telling you this, that is going to regulate your cortisol levels better than you getting your foot off the gas pedal, no matter what the formulation is. You can take all the ashwagandha and stuff that you want, but if you don't relieve the pressure, you're just taking stuff. I'm telling
And
you.
that includes cognitive decline. Like stress does have a huge role in cognition and our ability to balance everything. I have such a great example with blood glucose levels. I had two gentlemen clients at the same time, and one of them, they were both using a CGM. And one of them said, I have a normal glucose spike in response to my morning oatmeal after a good night's sleep. And I
Huh?
have a high spike after a poor night's
Oh,
sleep.
that's interesting. Yeah.
And then around the same time, I had a different gentleman who said, I have a normal glucose response to my morning oatmeal on a Saturday morning. But on a Monday morning, I will have a major spike in
Wow.
response to the same breakfast. And what's the difference between Saturday and Monday? It's a work day,
The
and
work
he was
day.
working on 100% commission. And so the pressure's on, and your stress response or your lack of sleep and taking out the metabolic trash while you're sleeping has an impact on your blood glucose levels. And so it's not just about the food. And
Yeah.
if you can utilize, a continuous glucose monitor just to see what's happening, it's not something you need to obsess over. It's just like check these little data points and see, like, I ate this food, what happened? Or this stressful thing happened, what happened with my blood sugar? I, slept poorly last night, what happened with my blood sugar? Because it could be something not just about the food, but it's like, oh, I went too long without eating. And now your body's going, hey, we've got low blood sugar, we need some blood
Hello.
sugar. And so your muscle is just going to release that glycogen, and you might have those spikes. So
And then it'll release protein and you'll have those spikes. That's what I'm seeing so much in labs now is the breakdown of collagen, like for protein. It's incredible to see in skeletal muscle in women because you're not eating enough.
yeah, are you seeing on the organic acid tests that you're using?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
And,
That
and
makes
it's
sense.
interesting because you start looking for, you kept seeing patterns, and you'll never see the same individual twice because we're all built differently. But you can start to see patterns in different age groups when people say, I can't sleep, and this and that and the other, and I'm fatigued. And usually it can't sleep, super fatigued, even though I'm quote sleeping. It's right there. It's amazing to see. I'm like, okay, how do we reverse that? Protein sufficiency, foot off the gas pedal. It's amazing how disruptive our lifestyles are. And we can do I was about to say we can do all the yoga and Qigong we want, which we do. But if that's still a patch for you not actually dealing with your stuff, it's going to show up. So it's amazing to see that. I'm like, okay, we'll take a collagen supplement. No, why don't we deal with what the issue is? Your body can restore.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need a supplement to fix something. We just need to slow down the breakdown of something.
Yeah,
And
it's amazing. It's amazing all these years in clinical practice how the basics never stop. We learn more about food and things we're going to push and pull. But I would say the longer I'm in the practice, the fewer the supplements I use. Because people come in with plenty of them. So I'm like, can you just tell me what you got in the cabinet? Good, let's use that one. Is it gone
Yep.
past the expiration date? A month, we'll still use it.
Yep.
I mean, what you got in there? Good, we don't have to order anything. Like,
Exactly.
I'm not making
Yeah.
fun. It's just like the damage that is being done by us trying to plug in the gaps with something where we actually don't know if it's going to be right for our physiology or we're treating the wrong system. So, the blood sugar piece, I think, is like cholesterol. It's sort of downstream from the issue, or it's a manifestation of an imbalance, as we've learned so well. And once you pull up your socks with digestion, optimize the fats, optimize the protein, get rid of the junk. We know that piece. Then a lot of things come back online, and it's just a case of tweak, nip, tuck. Okay, pull out that glycine, or whatever we're doing, or change the form of the supplement. But I think the other big thing when I'm thinking out like the big five, as I say, the big 10, we have the big five here, is detoxification, which you've alluded to, right, which is environmental exposure. But let's talk about what we see in the genetics there. Like, what is a clue that we have to open up the drain here because we're going to have an issue? What do you see there?
Yeah, those types of clients will often have compounded, CYP 450s, so phase one detoxification is a little mucked up. They might have, some of our oxidative stress enzymes we talk about often,
the
our
time.
catalase, glutathione peroxidase, superoxide dismutase. But then in phase two, we might have glutathionase transferase deletions. I see those really pretty often.
Very.
So then instead of, giving more and giving people more to do, the goal is to set up detoxification to work better. And that's something I talk about up front with my presentations too, is like, yes, I agree. Our colleagues who say this all the time, your liver and kidneys are the ones that are doing the detoxification. That is true.
That is true.
But,
That's your job.
but Amanda and I stare at these reports every day and go, this person cannot detoxify. How do I know that? Their lymphatics are backed up. So they've got sinus issues. Their ears feel like they're clogged. You can see the lymph nodes. They've got swelling places. If they wake up and their faces are puffy, lymphatics are backed up and they're not pooping. They've got skin rashes and just histamine out the wazoo. Those are your poor detox clients. So their liver and
Don't
kidneys.
give them a green smoothie.
this is detoxification is not a trendy smoothie, as Amanda's suggesting. This is a metabolic
It
process that
is.
needs support, and we're not just green juicing to solve that problem.
You'll give them a great insulin hit, but you will not burst the drain over. A drain over. I'm thinking a drain over. A
Drano.
Drano, right, right. Like green smoothies are not Drano for the liver. There's other issues here. So, yeah. So we'll talk about how we do it. But I like the image you put there of like the rashes, the sinuses, the ears are plugged. So all of them pointing to histamine, which is basically the canary in the coal mine saying something's wrong, something's wrong. But the lymphatic thing is interesting because I just talked to my PT about that this morning. I'm like, so as a PT, what do you think about, exercise to move lymph, and I said, how much can that work? They said, well, it does. Anything movement is going to move lymph, but there's also specific like acupuncture and massage, right, work. But PTs do a lot of inpatient work, I guess, to move lymphatics when they're swelling after trauma and surgery. So, when you're seeing that, so it's like open the drain. So you're looking at lymph. What are you doing? And what are you suggesting when you know it's all backed up?
Yeah, the lymphatic massage, having a massage therapist or a PT work on some of those with you. Acupuncture points do a great job of that. I
Yeah.
recommend castor oil packs so often.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
when
You
I,
do.
and when I give presentations, that's like what people are raising their hands, like going, this seems like a low-hanging fruit. Can you tell me more about that? And I wish we had more research on it, but we just don't. So it but it is super helpful for so many of my clients who aren't sleeping well, who are on so many like mood stabilizing medications. They're not pooping well. They've got thyroid issues. I had one woman who was just like, I had very low expectations of a castor oil pack, but my goodness, that made a huge difference.
It's interesting, isn't it, that it's
Yeah. Even inversion, so like looking at heart rate variability, inversions can help move metabolic byproducts out of the brain and to the rest of the body. And so it doesn't need to be, a yogi
yeah, you're
headstand or handstand, but even just putting your legs up,
sinking legs up the wall both.
elevated
Yeah.
up the wall, or even, laying on the couch with your head down or laying on the floor with your feet up on the couch. Even little things like that, especially when you're traveling and you've got stagnant, blood movement, you're not getting up and moving around very often. So those can be really helpful. Even sauna can help support, and red light therapy, those can all really do wonderful things. Epsom salt baths. So find the things you enjoy. There's
Or
not,
dry brushing either, right? That I'm thinking about
yes,
that.
brushing, or even like castor oil brushing too
I
can
didn't
be
think about
really,
that. Yeah.
really helpful. So encouraging, skin exfoliation as well. All of that is going to help move lymphatics.
So
So there's
amazing.
not one right or wrong way to, to do lymphatic drainage, but just do something, jump rope, go
Yeah,
just
move
little
or
small movement.
jumping. What is it on the trampoline? The rebounder. I don't have one of those. But yeah, or even, so you and I, we talk.
Vibration plates are like little massagers. You can
Yeah,
get
that's
massagers
true.
and put them over your lymphatics and
Or 5 minutes of qigong, right? Just like simple
yep.
tapping, because qigong will hit certain like lymphatic points. Like, it's interesting when you look at Chinese medicine, what they're teaching you. Just the tapping. Why would you tap? Well, you're moving lymph. Even down here, you're moving lymph and different acupuncture points too. So I think so much of the work I'm doing, even listening to you, is helping people understand their bodies and how to use these very simple, that free techniques that people in Eastern medicine and our ancestors have known since the beginning of time, and now we're just using them. Yes. So these are free, everyone. Free brushing is, once you get the brush, is free. So yeah.
Yeah. Even if you're in the shower and you use a washcloth, but like
Yeah, that's true. Just like,
stimulate the lymphatics and,
yeah,
add
true.
add a nice smell with your aromatherapy and
You can get those little, just, you can open them up now. Paul will get them occasionally. They're like little lavender or verbena. So they look like little soap cubes. You just put them on the drain, right? And when the aromatherapy, when the warmth hits them or the water hits them, it's cool.
Exactly. I
Okay.
mean, there's a couple years ago, there was a book that I had read called Detoxify or Die by Sherry Rogers. And the more, just looking at all the DNA tests that I look at and the world that we live in, what eventually is killing us? It's detoxification. We're
That's
exposed to this,
true.
that, or the other thing. Combine that with our predisposition to poor detoxification. I'm raising my hand over here. I'm the first one to go. Like if we've got detoxification issues, I'm like, when the weather changes, I feel like my head is a
Yeah,
balloon,
that's
and
interesting.
I'm super sensitive to weather changes, and
Oh,
I'm just
that's
like,
tough where you
oh.
live
And
too. Oof.
in Indiana lately, it's been
Ooh.
like it's either 80 or it's 40, and it's 80 again, and it's 40. I was like, please stop, just pick one and just stay there.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my God. Yeah, that's brutal. We were looking at detoxification. So when you talked about the P450 enzymes, so those are ones, if you ever look at a report that begin with CYP or CYP, and we think of those of when they're disruptive, they can actually be upregulated, that they work even faster, but not always, which means it sort of sends information over to the bridge to the second kind of part of detoxification. And a lot of times that's where we see things are gummed up. She could have like slow or genes or deleted, at least on paper. So it's like hitting a brick wall, which is what happens with you, right? It's like, whoa, wait, the weather changes and my body cannot react that fast. But it's interesting. I've never seen this before. The other day I opened a report and all the GSTs were homozygous, so
Ooh.
or deleted. So deletion, and I'm like, oh, wait here. And yet this is an individual who had been searching for solutions. Classic, right? The people like searching for solutions. And plenty of supplements, none of which work. I'm like, no wonder you can't even handle the tiniest of loads. We have to open up the drain, drain the swamp. And this is where nutrigenomics, I think, is really powerful, because we can get in with these tiny, almost like homeopathic level dosing, tiny signals to work with these genes or work around them. But yeah, I'm amazed you could tolerate anything. Because everything is an affront. Her body was so slow to produce glutathione. And the answer is give glutathione or NAC. It's not. It's like to work with the system to bring it back online and, yeah, get all the boats to float. So, yeah, that was unusual to see that. I'm like, oh, all right, this is where we're working. Forget everything
Yeah.
else. You can't sleep because, like the sink, you're going to drown, in trying to get rid of the junk. And then you can't get rid of the junk because you're not sleeping. It's amazing.
Yeah, the themes that we see are we either have too much oxidative stress coming in or not enough detoxification going out, or both.
Yeah.
And that manifests in so many, disease states that we see, from the histamine to the neurodegenerative to the ADHD. But like it's like that's biochemistry. We've got substrates and we've got products. Always supporting, the redox equation
Exactly.
at its simplest level, and that's really all we're doing. It's not as difficult as you would think. So.
I think sometimes it's where's the aperture, right? When you can see so many things, because all of what you said is going to absolutely like wipe out the efficiency of the mitochondria, and you're going to show up with chronic fatigue. Well, we don't just give you alpha lipoic acid and acetyl L-carnitine and a bunch of B vitamins. Like, let's whap up the mitochondria, because all you do is create more chaos. And I've seen that, like people, like literally you put someone into kind of anxiety or some kind of meltdown because the body cannot deal with that. So I think the hardest thing we have to do is look at all the patterns, say, boom, this is the aperture. And then, and you and I were talking about this, and probably we'll end on this, is the patient's view as a client is really required, because it's not that there's so much damage, but there's so much we have to dig through to get to clarity. And then we have to start rebuilding on one or two things at a time. And sometimes we don't get maybe it's not niacin, maybe it's not B3, and maybe it's not magnesium glycinate, it's threonate, like you said. And sometimes we know exactly where we need to work, but your body is N of one. And so trying to tweak requires an absolute partnership between the practitioner and the patient, and know that we will get there, that this isn't a 2-week solution. It could be weeks, right, Sarah? Months. You can feel better relatively soon, but the journey is long, and sometimes there are detours, and it's not easy.
Yeah, and I'll add too, if you have, some of these risk factors in your genes like APOE4, stop drinking alcohol now.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. Like if your goal is to not have cognitive decline or cancer and it runs in your family, you don't need it. It's not adding anything for you. It's shortening your days and making detoxification and oxidative stress that much harder. So
definitely detoxification, because it steals the B vitamins, energetics, it steals energy. It's amazing. I can tell, and looking back now, if I do have a glass of anything, it has to be really early on, because if not, oh yeah, that's my B1 and my folate and B6 out the window. So if any of you drink alcohol and wake up with the anxiety in the middle of the night, it's B6, baby. It's gone over to do something else for you, which means you can make serotonin and dopamine, and your brain's like, what? There goes the cortisol. There goes your blood sugars. And it's
blood sugar.
Yeah, boom. So try this with a CGM. We'll have to ask Karen. So what happens? Did you ever try a glass of wine and let us know what happens between 2 and 4 o'clock? We'll have to ask her. She probably tried it, right?
It's been mixed, actually.
Yeah.
That was something that she's noticed with alcohol, is sometimes the blood sugar overnight will actually stay lower. And so that's very confusing data. Now, obviously, we know some of the other mechanisms with alcohol, that it's not just about the blood sugar, but
No.
It sometimes will surprise you that it's not having
Not
that
linear.
direct action on the blood sugar. Yeah, there's more to it than that.
That's interesting. I'm gonna read
I'm
her
sure she wrote about
book.
it in the book. I'm sure she wrote about it. I think it just came in the mail today.
Oh
I
my
got to go to
gosh, I need to add
her
that
little
to the
book party.
stack.
She had a book release party
Is she
last
local
week.
to you? Is she in Indy? Or?
No, she's in the Pacific
I
Northwest.
thought she
So
was, yeah. Oh my gosh, she had a book party. That's great.
yeah, virtual one. It was fun. We had
That's
there was like 50 people on
Oh
it,
my
and we
gosh,
just had a
good
good
for her.
time.
That's super, super awesome.
Yeah,
All right, so did we
what I
navigate
got.
APOE?
Yeah, that's what I got today. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, we navigated it. And so what would be take homes? It's not a prediction, it's not a diagnosis. For us, it's I didn't even know it's a check engine light. It's like, okay, we're just going to run through a number on our checklist. Check, yep. Good, carry on. It is not predictive. And like you said, with that amazing statistic, you have a higher number of people. What was it with APOE4? They have a higher number of what cases?
So APOE 4E4 is like 5% of the population, but it increases the risk for Alzheimer's to 60% of those,
Yes.
but then are only 15% of the cases. So it really,
Yeah.
the genes load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. So this is not the, diagnosis or an equation to suggest it's a diagnosis. And so that's why we chose to just kind of put a pause on the rest of our recording schedule, because I think it's just important to address the trends as they come from a place of calm, and we want to make decisions based on peace and logic and science, and not panic and fear. So
Exactly. Cool. Well, that was our detour or deviation, like a 1-hour detour.
yeah,
But it
I
was
loved
fun.
it. It was great. Unstructured and just having a conversation. So a whole episode of chit chat. This is our normal.
Hope you enjoyed it, everyone. Send us your questions and and your curiosities, and if you need someone to help you, if you have your genes or you're interested in it, get a hold of either one of us. And if we can't directly help, we are plugged into a network of people who we trained with, or I trained them, or Sarah's trained and mentored them. So get your help.
Yeah, it's great. And if you are on Instagram, if you don't already follow, DNA_dietitian is me. And then Amanda is at Genomic Kitchen. So I post our reels in there. So when we have new episodes, I'll post little clips of how things went during the episode to entice you in to hear a little bit more. So we will see you next time, where we will get back on schedule with our sleep conversation.
We'll be back.
So see you next month. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone.